Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Ripke. I'm the Executive Director of the EAUC, or Educational Association of University Centers. We are one of the hosts for this monthly webinar, or bi-monthly webinar. Our other host is Bernadette. Bernadette, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Bernadette Grafton. I'm the University Center Program Coordinator for the EDA. Dan and I have been doing these webinars for a little over a year now, and we think it's really a great way to connect university centers across the nation and to just have open dialogue about various topics that are of interest. So I'm very excited for our agenda today. Thanks.
Good. Great, thank you. This has been a great opportunity for us to connect. One of our big priorities here is not just to share best practices, but also to create a unified community of all the EDA university centers across the country. It is good to see everyone's faces as you go through the videos of everyone's Zoom feed. So, and as I said a few minutes ago, it's great to see a few faces that I haven't seen in quite a while. Our program today is a rather lengthy one, and we have quite a bit of information to cover. So Bernadette and I decided to keep the agenda very, very short in terms of what we wanted to add to it. The one thing I do want to make sure to mention now prior to the program is that our next meeting is going to be held 1 week earlier on November 18th rather than on November 25th. Our next scheduled meeting would normally fall the day before Thanksgiving, and although we know you're all committed, we know that might be a big ask to have you come and work the day before Thanksgiving. So write down on your calendar November 18th. I will be sending out a notice within about a week with that date. Bernadette and I'll send it out when we send out the coordinates for the recording for this session. So just want to make sure I get that out in case some of you have to leave early. With that, we have a great program today. We have, whoops, too many screens going on. We have 3 EDA University Centers directors who are very experienced in working with Indigenous populations and Native American tribes. First of all, we have Donald Andrews, the Dean of the College of Business at Southern University. We have Tom Harris, the Director of the Center for Economic Development out of UNR Reno. And then we have Levi, who's the Native American Advancement and Tribal Engagement for the University of Arizona. So what we're going to do is go through, have Tom go first because he does not have slides. And then from that, we'll go to Levi and then on to Donald. So Tom, if you want to take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. I was going to go by the points that you bring out. I'm kind of, as old Bo Ballou will know, I'm kind of unusual in that I have a extension appointment also at UNR. And in the West, we have a lot of what we call Native American Ag Extension programs. And this is how I got started working with Native American reservations in the state of Nevada. Plus, I work with a lady named Stacy M. who heads this up. Stacy, the M name, is a very big name in the Native American circles in the state of Nevada, which has been an entree for us to go through and do other things with her to get us in working with that. It takes time, I might say, to get working with some Native American tribes. But if you have something luckily like that really does help. The state of Nevada has about 4 major tribes, and it has 27 reservations and colonies, a lot of big number of colonies individual. Levi in Arizona has this huge Navajo and Hopi tribe, but we have several almost independent in how they work. Membership can go from 56 people up to 2,000. And when we work with them, you have to be aware that there's people who live on the reservation, but also there are people who live off. And so this has been different things that we've been working with economic development. One of the things we'll talk, I think Levi, we'll talk a little bit about sovereignty. Yes, you have these things, the differences on the land and how they work. Leadership transition, yes, I've had many of it. Basically, a lot of the Native American tribes, it'll be some have almost like annual elections, and so you may be working with someone, and someone may be voted off, or there's an election change. Again, you have to be patient and work with them to get that continuity. Rural isolation, one of the main things I've found is looking at them is working with abilities with internet. Internet is something with broadband, how to use it. It's a very unique areas. There are many of them in isolated areas in the West, and many of them there's a few of them in Reno, like Reno, have Reno Sparks Indian Colony right next to the big casino. The used to be the MGM casino. Very unusual for that to happen. In fact, some of the property we worked with them, we made there some of the property they were able to purchase, that they now have a Walmart that goes in right downtown Nevada, or Reno. That's unusual for many areas. The other things about working, a couple of things I think we've been very successful on has been working with them on special projects, such like I said, the Walmart. We worked with many truck stops and try to help them work with that. And also in water issues, as Mark Twain would say, in the West, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. And so the Truckee River during Harry Reid, when he was senator, there was a change in how allocation of water was from the Truckee River, ran through Reno, and terminally all of our rivers end in the state, and it ends in Pyramid Lake. And Pyramid Lake was losing some of its fresh water, and there's this trophy fish called the cutthroat trout. We worked with them and talk about contentious. Yesterday's debate was kind of mild compared to changing water rights. We worked with them and how the Native Americans at the Pyramid River tribe could take that and use that for their recreation. Also, the Walker River was another one. There was a change. Senator Reid was looking at that. Again, Walker Lake, it's the terminus lake. It did not, it was turning salty. Again, there was a change in water rights and how to function with the economy, and really how to make it even better. What really helped is Stacy M., who I work a lot with, is a member of the Walker River Paiute tribe. And so we worked with them on mitigating those water transitions and those things. The other thing we've been working on right now is in the West. And I know Levi has some of these in Arizona. There's in 1994 is the Native American Land Grant Universities and Colleges. We have an area, Yarrington tribe. Again, they are all separate. We're trying to work with them to develop a Native American college, and junior college specifically. Native Americans in the state of Nevada are very low in high school education and even going to college, intimidated. Some we've found much better success if they go to a junior college. We're trying to work with that. You have to go through several steps to become a Native American college. We're working with our Dean of College of Agriculture here, UNR's the land grant, and trying to build that. I'm very encouraged. I hope we do something. I hope it does. There's always political things that come out that it'd be right in the central of Nevada, where there's a lack of a 2-year community college, which would help develop it. Lessons learned, I would say my lessons learned is that if you get a partner like I was so lucky, is that we have a big program, a national extension program called, Native American Ag Production, and I worked with them. That got me into talking to many of the leaders. Also, the person who headed it up was somebody who is very pronounced, his family is very pronounced in the Native American group in the state of Nevada, which helped entree. And then from that, we've been patients is working with them, trying to develop programs. And I guarantee we kind of look helpful with the water, with the Truckee River as a non-partial, as a neutral party in these reallocations of the water rights, which helped. There are ongoing things that need to be done. I hope this Native American land grant comes through, crossing our fingers, and we continue to work with with them in our economic development. Even with COVID-19, there's been some isolated, I know this is true in Levi and Navajo, there's isolated pockets where these things have exploded, and working with them to mitigate it, and hopefully get them to look in incorporating tourism. We get a lot of, when things opened up and we get a lot of foreign travelers in the state of Nevada, and this probably happens in Arizona, all of them have seen Bonanza and they want to see where the cowboys and Indians are. If they can work on that, they can make some very good tourism. A lot of them are truck stops we work with, and other things. But also what's tricky is also working with the off the reservation group. But also I found that also the younger group are more open to different areas that for economic development. So Dan, that's my little speech for my elevator on level 4 here.
All right. Thanks a lot, Don. That was great. Thanks a lot. And what we're going to do, we'll do questions towards the end. So we can see that. Real quick, I'm going to switch over to Levi. And I can run your slides from here if that works for you. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, there I go. Hey, my presentation's done. There we go.
There we go.
Hey, I'm going to go really quickly, Dan, just to provide a little bit of an overview, and then I'll answer a couple of the questions at the very end, and then we can move on. The reason why I put this presentation together is just to provide some background information. And if we can go to the first slide.
Yep.
I think it's really important when you start working with tribal and tribal communities, you understand the relationship that they have with the federal government. So I put this in here just so you know that it seems like about every 30 or 40 years after 1790s is when you start to see acts that really had big impacts within the tribal communities. So beforehand, before there was the European population, you had tribes. You talk to any tribes, they'll say they've been here for time immemorial. My creation story for my tribe is Mount Charleston, right outside of Las Vegas. I think you'll find that actually a lot of that information with the tribes. The next slide. So these are just some of the things that were going on. Tribes had to deal with the Removal Act. There was the General Allotment Act, the Dawes Act. So these are just things that have impacted the tribes. And I think when you go through them, and I'm glad Tom brought this up, sometimes the younger generation will have grown up in the Indian self-determination period, where older generations have grown up in the termination period, which is, can you go to the next slide real quick, Dan? So these are just some of the periods of going on, and this is just for background information. Feel free to share it with everyone. As I said, there's a termination period. Then we came to Indian Self-Determination Act, and that's probably the biggest one still impacting us today, although gaming has really provided, especially for tribes with location base, provided a great revenue for economic development. But it's not the cure-all for everything. But really, the Self-Determination Act now allows tribes to actually directly contract out with the federal government. It gives them a opportunity to do some self-determination. But the one thing I just want to point out real quickly on this, we brought some of the original authors of the Indian Self-Determination Education Act to NAU at the time, and I'm not with NAU anymore. I'm with the University of Arizona. And the question was asked, well, did this do everything you thought it would do? And they said, no, we feel like tribes have only implemented 25% of it. So I still think there's a lot more that tribes actually have based upon this relationship that they have with the federal government. Okay, Dan, go ahead. The next one. You'll hear tribal sovereignty, right? When you're dealing with tribal sovereignty, a lot of times you need to understand where that came from. It's actually in the Commerce Clause, which states that to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among several states and with Indian tribes. So that's where tribes get the beginning of their sovereignty. And whenever you're doing any work with tribes, sometimes there'll be a limited waiver. Sometimes there's creative ways to go around it. But that seems like that's always one of the issues or challenges or opportunities to overcome when you're doing a deal with working with a tribe on any type of economic development. At least that's what I've seen. Okay, Dan. Yeah, you can go again. That just kind of talks about tribes. So as of today, I think there's actually 574, maybe a little bit old. Tom pointed this out. In the state of Arizona, a pretty good sized state, over a quarter of the state is federal trust land. And two of the three largest landmass tribes are located in Arizona. Tom mentioned Navajo. The third one is Tohono-O'odham, which a huge tribal reservation, and also extends a lot of their tribal members extend into Mexico as well. Okay, then we're going to show a couple of maps just so you can actually see. Here's some of the tribes. And as you can see, a majority of the tribes that are federally recognized now are located west of the Mississippi. But it wasn't always like that. But we know that just as the America grew, United States of America grew, that's what kind of happened as the force. We talked about those different periods of time, the removal and all that. And this is where we currently are at today. The next one. Yeah, there it is a little bit more. I want to give California because there's one little dot on there. That's my tribe, Chemehuevi, and I always like to put up this slide so make sure that my tribe is highlighted. Next slide. One of the things when you're going to do economic development of tribes, for me, there's three things that I always talk about: status of the land, uniqueness of the tribe, and access to capital. If we can go to the next one. Status of the land, I think it's really important to understand that you're dealing, if it's federal trust land, sometimes in federal trust land, it can't be sold or taxed or encumbered. Therefore, there's limitations on putting your land up for collateral. So tribes don't have that option. And then also some tribes have actually bought land that's not held in federal trust. And then sometimes there was the allotment period where you might actually be dealing with on tribal lands, but you'll be dealing with allottees who actually they have that right for that land. So although it's in part of the reservation, that's why when you go into New Mexico, with Navajo Nation, and then with Fort Mojave, you'll see checkerboard. It's right because it's a lottee that's no longer held in trust by the tribe, and then the next segment of land is held by the tribe. So I think it's really important to understand when you're dealing with a tribe, at least in my experience, is it federal trust land, is it fee land, fee simple land they call it, or is it allotment land? Okay, next slide. All tribes are unique. Like I said here, there's 22 tribes. They all have their distinct forms of government. Their leaders, you need to know right away, are you dealing with the chairman, a governor, a president? Is it a council? Is it a board? And one of the unique things I'm starting to see a lot take place, and I'm excited about, is some tribes are developing their own economic development authorities, right? Their own economic development corporations, and they're trying to get Section 17s or corporations. So they have the ability to, one of the big issues is sovereignty, right? Doing a limited waiver. Well, these economic development corporations can do a limited waiver where the tribe the tribe itself doesn't have to. It's just that small corporation. We've seen that that's actually sped up the process for doing economic development within the tribal communities or community development. Next one. So I mentioned to you some of the concerns about the land not being able to be encumbered. So sources of access to capital to actually do economic development. I find that's one of the challenges that we also see quite a bit. So there's the conventional loans, there's the self-finance, there's loan guarantees, and grants. And sometimes those are the ones that you're actually dealing with when you're doing some of these specific projects within the tribal communities. Now, I will say these economic development authorities, sometimes the tribes have capitalized them with some funds. They have the ability to actually go out and self-finance or actually put the deals together. I'm really excited about, there's only a handful that I see that are actually working. And I think that's one of the ways that really have a big impact within tribal communities is if they develop their own economic development corporations. All right, Dan. Then I wanted to throw this in there. One of the things that we start doing lately is, I mentioned lack of access to capital. One of the things that we start to do with tribes is we would host a business plan competition. Similar to the Shark Tank model, you come in, they do a pitch, winners receive monies. And we've done it in two different forms. We've done it with tribal communities and within high schools located within the tribal communities. And what we found out is these businesses actually have a better rate of not only starting up, but staying in business for longer than 2 or 3 years. This picture to the left of our screen, it's a couple of people from the San Carlos Apache tribe. The individual who won is Baxter. He's on the right. He opened up a HVAC business. he was lacking one license certification. With his winnings, he was able to go do that. Once he got that, he actually scored the contract for their housing authority. So he almost has guaranteed work there within the tribe itself. Anderson, the one on the left, opened up a mobile mechanic shop, you know, where he'll go and do basic auto maintenance or auto repairs at your house. The rest of the pictures are a high school called Whitehorse High School. We were working with the student youth there. They had 5 different business plans that they came up with. We promoted a sale day. We gave each of the businesses $100. They went out there. Some of them were able to make a profit, some weren't. But it was a good idea for them to actually get their arms around, hey, what does it take to really own a business and operate a business? The winner actually is a silversmith, although he's just in high school at this picture, he's a silversmith, and he expanded his parents and their silversmith business to actually include internet capabilities and advertising on the website. Next one. So the lessons learned, fry bread. I had to put this in there. I don't know if any of you have ever eaten fry bread. Sometimes I always ask people, is this a traditional food? And sometimes I hear yes, and sometimes I hear no. The story I was told how fry bread came to be is it was part of the food rations when tribes were put on reservation. Sometimes the meat was spoiled, but they still cooked it to get the grease out of it. They used flour and water, and this is how they made fry bread. And that's one of the reasons why we were taught to respect our elders, is they're survivors. So I always liken everything to do when we're doing work with tribes. Sometimes you got to think outside the box. Hey, because the meat's spoiled doesn't mean you can't use it. What can you do? And this is a good example of fry bread. So I always make mention of that. And sometimes we argue who has the best fry bread. Reality, it's not a traditional food, but I think everything goes back to fry bread. All right, is that good? Finally, I want to say, if you're going to work with tribes, you got to have a lot of patience. With patience comes respect. And once you have respect, you have trust. And that's when you can get the deal done. So that's my quick presentation. I look forward to answering any questions after all the presentations are done.
All right, great. Thank you very much. And we have one more set of slides here. Hold on. And over to Donald.
Good afternoon. Donald Andrews here at Southern University, Baton Rouge. We can go on to the next slide. We've had an EDA University Center now since 2013. Dan, you can go to the next slide. We've been around since, our College of Business has been around since 1937, but we've been around since 1880. We are an historically Black university. We are also a land grant university as well. And one of the great things we have a law center, and it's really through the law center that we got to working with Native American groups. We can go on to the next slide, Dan. And as I said, we've been working with the Southern University Law Center. As Levi talked about sovereignty, that's been a big issue. And also working with tribes, in some cases they might waive sovereignty to some extent, but some of the best practices we found in terms of working with Native American tribes, primarily here in Louisiana, there are 4 federally recognized tribes, also some groups in the state of Mississippi. So we've been primarily working with the Coshada, the Mississippi Band of Choctaw, and the Tunica Biloxi. And what we found, similar to what Tom and Levi have said, that some of the best practices, and we've been working, and we're lucky, as I said, we have a law center, and the law center has 3 Native American faculty members there. And so that's really been our entree into the Native American community. So you have to do your homework. You have to understand the tribal community that you're interested in working with, including knowing about their history as well as their culture. Do not assume you know what is best for the community. You have to develop a respect for their community as well as their customs. Get to know their concerns and aspirations. Work to develop a plan that can help to achieve their agreed upon goals and objectives. And as Tom once said, I think, there are always elections and there are changes in leadership. So you really have to have buy-in from the individuals in terms of what their goals and objectives are. And those may change as leadership changes. So you really have to be flexible. Some of the activities that we have engaged in, number one, from the business school, we helped to develop an economic development conference. We held that conference in 2019, and that was really a success. We had over 300 people that came to this conference, including the governor of the state. There's widespread interest because the Native American tribes have casinos, and they're in rural areas. And so in some of these rural communities, they provide maybe 50 to 60% of the employment in those communities. So it's basically big business with their hotels and golf courses, and as well as gaming. So they provide a lot of economic development within those particular areas. We've also signed, the law school has MOUs, agreements on developing Indian law programs within the law school. So those are coming along quite rapidly. Also, we've engaged in opportunities for tribal members to attend university programs. We've actually had 2 or 3 of the Native Americans to come into the business school and pursuing a degree in management and marketing. Also considering studies on the topics to diversify their economic base. They basically are finding that gambling, more or less, they can't solely depend on that. There's now internet gaming and sports betting and all the rest. So they want to really find out how they can utilize the revenue they're receiving from that particular base to diversify their activities. So they're really interested in entrepreneurship. They've also asked us to do economic-based studies and do some economic modeling in terms of how their economic base can be modified and what sort of industries may have the greatest multiplier effect. Also, in terms of the economic development conference that we had, they're really interested in the new farm bill in terms of what may be applicable to them in terms of the rural landscape. And finally, we've been working on developing grants and contracts and proposals that can be developed. So those are some of the activities that we have been involved in. And as I said, as a university center, we're moving in working more with our law school because they are the ones that really have had the entree into the Native American community here in Louisiana and Mississippi to some extent. We can go on to the next slide. This is an example of the MOU that was signed between the Southern University Law Center and the Mississippi Band of Choctaw. And so basically it outlines here the deliverables from the Choctaw as well as the deliverables from the Law Center. And so basically the Choctaw have indicated they're going to be coordination with the law school faculty to create externships, internship program opportunities for law students to become more involved in the Indian law professionals or becoming Indian law professionals, and also to engage in curricular training opportunities with the Law Center faculty to enhance the skill sets of the Southern University law students in terms of understanding Indian law careers. So basically looking at how the law students can become more familiar with Indian law and the professions and careers that they may be able to follow. What the law school is going to provide is basically they're going to establish an Indian law program that offers a 3-hour credit course on federal Indian law and hosts at least 1 conference per academic year on Indian law and policy topics. So they've been doing this now for about 3 years. So I've attended some of those conferences. They're quite interesting in terms of individuals who are not familiar with Indian law, understanding more or less its evolution and how it can be more or less impactful in terms of their ability to do business with the reservations. Also identify tribal collaboration in terms of grant contract opportunities related to Indian education projects, foster and stimulate cooperation between the Law Center and the Mississippi Band of Choctaw, and also to create internship opportunities and experiential opportunities for the students related to Indian affairs, legislation, and regulation And this was primarily with the Chittimancha tribe here in terms of this particular activity. So there are opportunities here in terms of implementing these MOUs, and we are also looking at other aspects of how we can expand this in terms of business, accounting, and various other disciplines we have within the business school. Dan, we can go on to the next slide, please. This is another example. This is the Economic Development Conference that we developed back in 2019. It took us about a year to develop this, so we started in 2018. We had been doing economic development conferences within our university center, primarily around the state of Louisiana. But this was the first one that we basically developed specifically with the Tunica Biloxi Nation. And so basically, it was sort of a technology transfer from us to them. And so basically, they took leadership. We provided some of the parameters in terms of our development of the conference. We provided some of the speakers, but they really got excited about this, and they involved the whole community. They were able to get individuals from around the country, speakers out of Nevada and various other experts in Indian law, and individuals out of Oklahoma in terms of their Indian Chamber of Commerce that they brought down. And it was really an exciting program. As I said, the governor of the state ended up being one of the speakers at the program. So we can move on to and we focused on the entrepreneurial ecosystem and how we can create strategic partnerships. And it was more of a rural focus because these reservations are basically in the rural areas. So we can move on to the next slide, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an outline of the program itself. It was a 3-day program. It was held at the casino and the hotel. So they had fabulous meeting facility, golf course, and all the rest. So it was really a nice environment. We had the Tunica Biloxi, we had the Southern University Law Center, Paragon Casino, the Parit Group, that's a Native American business group, as well as the EDA University Center were all sponsors of this program. We had entrepreneurship professors out of University of Texas, Austin that came over. We had one professor from Cornell. We had Bailey Walker, who is the president of the Native American Chamber of Commerce there in Oklahoma. We had some legislators out of Nevada. So it was really a great program, and some of the topics that we talked about were financial services, healthcare, agriculture, entrepreneurship, 5G expansion and broadband, small business opportunities, workforce development, business relationships, how to do business in terms of opportunities with tribal governments, as well as community development. So those were some of the major topics that we had during this conference. As I said, we had over 300 individuals in attendance. We can go on to the next slide, Dan. And these are some of we did a survey, and we got great feedback on the conference itself. They gave us criticisms and opportunities for improvement. And we were working on the second conference when COVID came down, so we had to delay it. And so we're working on now developing, say in 2021, a virtual conference, and we still are in quarantine at that time. But these are some of the topics that they wanted more information on. So you can see education was at the top of the list. Then economic development, entrepreneurship was the other major area of interest in terms of how they can diversify their business opportunities, as well as in terms of grants. So those are some of the major findings of topics of interest that more information is needed on. So that ends my presentation.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Donald, Levi, and Tom. So we've had a number of questions that came in over the course of the last few moments. We'll start with you, Donald, because you're still up. Christy Bell had a question: is the Southern University Law Center program that teaches Indian law and policy topics covered in an online format?
It's not in an online format now, but I guess in terms of COVID-19, they have moved to a hybrid format. There are some criteria that the law schools have to have or have to abide by as far as their accreditation is concerned. And I'm not sure how much of it can be online and how much has to be in a face-to-face component. But the chancellor of the law school is actually a graduate of the business school. He's an accounting professor, and actually he was one of my former students. And so if there's anything that can be done to make it entrepreneurial and make it an online program, I'm sure he'll be willing to accommodate those interests.
Can I just add to that? University of Arizona, we actually do have some modules that have been put into place on actually tribal law and policy and kind of the history. There's like 4 or 5 modules that walk you through, you know, just so you have a basic understanding of the impact of tribal law and policy. And then I think one of the modules actually deals with economic development.
Great. Bernadette?
Great. Yeah, so another kind of follow-up question to that for Don actually is, does the UC charge the tribes for the economic impact studies and modeling, and what is the Southern University Law Center service area?
Well, as far as the economic development projects we've been working on, we've not charged. We've kind of worked cooperatively in terms of putting on various programs, so it's kind of in-kind services and things of that nature, so we haven't had a charge of anything. But in the future, if they become more involved, I have 3 professors that are endowed professors in entrepreneurship and economic development. So it's been a part of their charge. And it's also, we're AACSB accredited. And so now one of the big things that AACSB wants business schools to do is that of social impact. So this has been one of the major things as far as our social impact is concerned.
I would say also in our case, Bernadette, we've done something like what Don's done, but the big major ones like we did on the water, that came from Senator Reed. It's a big research and outreach program.
Okay. So question for all of you, anyone can take this. What are some good strategies for outreach to Native American communities to help raise awareness about University Center resources?
Well, I guess in our case, you know, we were working with the law school. We do also have an ag extension service, and they're out in those communities. And so as a result of that, they've become more aware of the opportunities that they have with the Native American groups, and they're wanting to expand in terms of their agricultural development. We've passed some laws here in Louisiana now as far as hemp is concerned, and so the Native American groups are really interested in how the Ag Extension Service can help them in terms of developing some of their land resources to grow new crops, organic crops, and things of that nature. So I basically would say taking on kind of an agricultural extension philosophy in a lot of cases in terms of what you can do more or less to assist individuals who are out in, say, the more rural areas. And also in terms of, there have been some broadband initiatives. And so those groups are highly concerned about that, because if they're going to have small businesses development, they do need broadband. So they've been some of the big proponents of trying to get broadband as well. So I think basically we approach this from a problem-solving point of view. You may have different views on how to solve the problem, but at the end of the day, everybody wants that problem solved.
I would say, Bernadette, we're about the same way. Again, being land grant, we do have a Native American extension program, and that's gotten into areas. There's been even some interest lately, you know, with all the COVID that happened to meatpacking plants. Looks like meatpacking has been concentrated around Iowa. There may be some breakup on to break that stuff up, because if one plant gets COVID, it looks like the whole system. So during the winter, there was some interest in that, and we're still trying to work on that a little bit. It gets to inspections and all that kind of stuff, and do you have enough cow calves to operate the thing? So that's how that thing goes.
And then at NAU, I'm no longer there. I'm at U of A now, but at NAU, Northern Arizona University, we actually do host a Tribal Economic Outlook Conference. That's been one great way to actually engage the tribes. And the other thing I think is really critical is to show up in their communities. You know, sometimes we might sit and wait for an invitation. Other times we might hear of opportunities. And I just want to say, you know, sometimes it takes a long time to develop that relationship. I have a good friend at Yavapai Prescott Nation now, and he always tells the joke that I called him for 2 years before he ever called me back. And it took that constant follow-up. But, you know, when once that was done and he saw that, you know, we were legit and some of the things we were doing, we were able to partner and collaborate with them on a number of projects. And sometimes it does take that patience. But I think going to the tribal community, I know it's a little bit challenging now with COVID in place, but just being there. And one of the things I know that University of Arizona did pivot it real quick was, hey, how can we assist you with this COVID, whether it's with the PPEs or what can we do to assist you? So I think it's just looking at opportunities. That's what entrepreneurship is, right? Is seeing unmet needs and then answering them. You know, I'm so appreciative of what Donald just said is, you know, sometimes there might be issues with border towns and tribal communities, but at the end, everyone wants that problem to be taken care of or that issue to be taken care of. And I think that's one of the things that that I see University Centers able to do is to assist tribes and even areas around the tribes that are impacted, you know, with studies or what have you, to directly deal with those issues.
Yeah, I think that's a great reminder of, you know, the opportunity that university centers have. And I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on strategies for engaging face-to-face or engaging in other ways and the best ways to approach that. Happy to spend some time on that if you have other thoughts, but we do have one other question that has come through. That is, do you find values or value propositions associated with economic development varying in any significance from work in non-Indigenous communities?
You're saying non-Indigenous communities?
Yeah.
Comparing and contrasting between your work in non-Indigenous communities and what you find to be core values of Indigenous communities and how that may impact feasibility of economic development.
Well, I guess in our case, you know, we've been working primarily with mayors and cities around the state, and I guess, you know, there's a little concern about, you know, what are your goals and objectives? I mean, because we come and we bring resources, and people are sometimes suspicious that we may have some alternative agenda or whatever the case may be. But we'd say we're here more or less to provide you with university services and resources, and we'll meet you on the ground where you are. And so in a lot of cases, these communities have been neglected for a long time, and they need a lot of, I mean, because we're here in the Mississippi Delta. I mean, you know, the Mississippi Delta, we've got some of the poorest places in the country, and they've been left behind so long. And when you come into those communities, saying more or less, you know, you're willing to provide some short courses, some webinars, computer training. I mean, we've hauled computers and things to the communities because they didn't have them at the schools or whatever the case may be. So I guess, you know, if people have been left behind for so long, and here you come trying to introduce new technology, whatever, it takes a long time for them to kind of warm up to you, to put a little trust in you. So we've been willing to do that because, you know, we, as I said, we are a land grant school. We take on a lot of activities and a lot of programs for small farmers and small businesses and businesses that have, you know, we've gone through Hurricane Katrina, we've gone through many hurricanes since Katrina. And I guess we've kind of learned that, you know, when people have lost everything, you know, it takes some time for them to warm up to you there to provide them with some assistance. So I think in the case of the Native American community for us, you know, we didn't really know they were there, to be honest, and they were right next door almost, you know, so it's kind of like, you know, something, you know, you can't see, but it's right there before your eyes. So there's a lot of opportunities that we see that we can help those individuals, especially in the education space, especially in the entrepreneurship space. We think we can provide a lot of value, but it takes a little time to build up the trust.
It also takes, I thought Levi's information on capital is very good, because I think when some people go look, okay, we can go build, I'll just go buy this piece of land, just build my grocery store. Well, it doesn't work that way. There's several, Donald's got a very great linkage with the legal, with the law school, which is an interesting step you have to go through. We've also, through what Don was talking about, hurricanes in the Hopi tribe, and where Levi, we tried to work together a little bit on this, is that it seems weird. I've been here for a long time. And back in the 1980s, I worked on the economic impacts of building up these coal-fired electric power plants in the Four Corners area that are now being taken down. And one of the big impacts was buying coal from the Hopi tribe and Navajos. That has resounded some big economic, I mean, it's like 80% of their whole economy is just falling apart. Sometimes in that kind of case, we found that we got called upon and how to work with it and help them through something like that, which is a very big structural change.
So I didn't see any other questions coming through the chat, but I did want to give people on the phone an opportunity to ask any other questions they have. I know we have 9 minutes left. And also the speakers, if you have any questions for people who have joined us today, I think that could be helpful too. If you have, there's any other topics you wanted to cover regarding tribal engagement.
I just like to say, you know, piggybacking off of Levi in terms of the sovereignty issue. I mean, we brought some business people at the conference. I mean, they were wanting to do business. They saw opportunities, but they were really kind of turned off with the tribal sovereignty kind of issue in terms of capital investment and how would that work out. So I think that's an issue that our law school hopefully can work on. But I see that as a big issue in terms of capital, as well as education in terms of the types of instruments that could be developed more or less to help in that area. But based on one of the presentations, Bailey Walker out of Oklahoma, in terms of what he's done with their particular chamber of commerce, I think there's a lot of lessons there that can be learned from the business community.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I just have one item. It's not University Center based, but we're looking at growing our Native American faculty at the University of Arizona. So if any of you have any Native American talent that's getting their PhD, you know, I'd be curious to know, because, you know, that's one of the big push that I want to make is to train our own.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I had to take that time, but.
Well, that's good.
So you're looking for talent.
Mm-hmm. Everybody.
Good deal. All right.
Is that it?
I think
Everyone
so.
go eat some fry bread and tell me if it's traditional food or not. That's all I have.
Levi, I'd like to trade you some mud bugs for some fry bread, okay?
That sounds good. That sounds good.
Oh, Lord, that's great.
And we get Tootsie making his beer. So,
Macadamia nuts.
there you go. All right. Well, before
You guys need some water. We got plenty of it out here on the Mississippi.
We do need it. We need to put the fires out. It's a tale of two areas.
Yes, we need water. Water's life here. That's what they say. That's true.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Real quick before we start to lose people, a reminder that the video will be available in about 2 weeks. We'll edit it down just a little bit so it's a little better content. We did conduct a survey for those of you that participated. Thank you. We had roughly 41 of the EDA University centers around the country participate and tell us briefly what they do with Native American tribes, as well as a link to their resources. So we'll be circulating that in that same email. For our EAUC members, I've heard from many of you that you're looking for money. I don't know why. So what we started to do is to reach out to some of the foundations and other funders to see if they would, if you will, specialized in providing money to support EDA university centers. I've had a couple that said they are interested in providing funding, so I will be sending out emails letting people know about those opportunities as I come upon them. Don't look for something attractive. Look for something more like a Kiplinger letter that's half sentences, but I just want to get those funding opportunities out to you quickly. I don't want to become a graphic designer. So, and then one last reminder is that our next webinar will be on November 18th, and we'll have information about that coming up.
Dan,
As
can
always,
I just say something on the fundraising real quick?
Yeah.
One of the things that I found that's been beneficial is, I know the question came up is, does a tribe pay for a study or what have you? One of the things that we've done for fundraising is to approach the tribe on who they're, after you build up the relationship, is, you know, who are their big vendors, you know, and could you approach their vendors, corporate giving in behalf of them for a project that you want to do, work with them. And that's actually, it seems like it's a model that's actually, I've seen progress made in that regard. So as opposed to you approaching a corporate foundation, you know, seeking funds for a specific project, if the tribe already has a relationship, you know, it's almost in their behalf if the project's going to go back to that tribal community.
Cool. Real quick, and this is a question for Bernadette or someone from EDA, Jody or someone. We have a question of, can tribal colleges apply to become an EDA university center? I believe the answer is yes.
I
Bernadette?
think they can.
Yeah. Yes, they can.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, with that, I'd like to thank everyone, our speakers, Tom, Donald, Levi, and Bernadette, and Christy Bell for hosting us. So thank you very much.
And Christy, I'll get you that information when I can.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone. This has been great.
Yes,
All right,
thank you.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you all.